Sunday, 14 June, 1942. On Friday, June 12th, I woke up at 6 o'clock, and no wonder, it was my birthday. But of course I was not allowed to get up at that hour, so I had to control my curiosity until 6:45. Then I could bear it no longer, and went to the dining room, where I received a warm welcome from Motye, the cat. Soon after 7, I went to Mummy and Daddy, and then to the sitting room to undo my presents. The first to greet me was you, possibly the nicest of all. Then on the table there were a bunch of roses, a plant, and some peonies, and more arrived during the day. I got masses of things from Mummy and Daddy, and was thoroughly spoiled by various friends. Among other things, I was given Camera Obscura, a party game, lots of sweets, chocolates, a puzzle, a brooch, Tales and Legends of the Netherlands by Joseph Cohen, Daisy's Mountain Holiday, a terrific book, and some money. Now I can buy The Myths of Greece and Rome. Grand. Then Lise called for me, and we went to school. During recess, I treated everyone to sweet biscuits, and then we had to get back to our lessons. Now I must stop. Bye-bye. We're going to be great pals. Saturday, 20 June, 1942. I haven't written for a few days because I wanted, first of all, to think about my diary. It's an odd idea for someone like me to keep a diary, not only because I've never done so before, but because it seems to me that neither I, nor for that matter anyone else, will be interested in the unbosomings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. Still, what does that matter? I want to write, but more than that, I want to bring out all kinds of things that lie buried deep in my heart. There is a saying that paper is more patient than man. It came back to me on one of my slightly melancholy days while I sat chin in hand, feeling too bored and limp even to make up my mind whether to go out or stay at home. Yes, there is no doubt that paper is patient, and as I don't intend to show this cardboard-covered notebook bearing the proud name of diary to anyone, unless I find a real friend, boy or girl, probably nobody cares. And now I come to the root of the matter, the reason for my starting a diary. It is that I have no such real friend. Let me put it more clearly, since no one will believe that a girl of 13 feels herself quite alone in the world, nor is it so. I have darling parents and a sister of 16. I know about 30 people whom one might call friends. I have strings of boyfriends anxious to catch a glimpse of me and who, failing that, peep at me through mirrors in class. I have relations, aunts and uncles, who are darlings too. A good home. No, I don't seem to lack anything. But it's the same with all my friends. Just fun and joking, nothing more. I can never bring myself to talk about anything outside the common round. We don't seem to be able to get any closer. That's the root of the trouble. Perhaps I lack confidence. But anyway, there it is, a stubborn fact, and I don't seem to be able to do anything about it. Hence this diary. In order to enhance in my mind's eye the picture of the friend for whom I've waited so long, I don't want to set down a series of bald facts in a diary like most people do, but I want this diary itself to be my friend, and I shall call my friend Kitty. No one will grasp what I'm talking about if I begin my letters to Kitty just out of the blue, so, albeit unwillingly, I will start by sketching in brief the story of my life. My father was 36 when he married my mother, who was then 25. My sister Margaret was born in 1926 in Frankfurt am Main. I followed on June 12, 1929, and as we are Jewish, we emigrated to Holland in 1933, where my father was appointed managing director of Travis Incorporated. This firm is in close relationship with the firm of Coland and Company in the same building, of which my father is a partner. The rest of our family, however, felt the full impact of Hitler's anti-Jewish laws, so life was filled with anxiety. In 1938, after the pogroms, my two uncles, my mother's brothers, escaped to the United States. My old grandmother came to us. She was then 73. After May 1940, good times rapidly fled. First the war, then the capitulation, followed by the arrival of the Germans, which is when the sufferings of us Jews really began, followed each other in quick succession. Jews must wear a yellow star. Jews must hand in their bicycles. Jews are banned from trams and are forbidden to drive. Jews are only allowed to do their shopping between 3 and 5 o'clock, and then only in shops which bear the placard, Jewish shop. Jews must be indoors at 8 o'clock and cannot even sit in their own gardens after that hour. Jews are forbidden to visit theaters, cinemas, and other places of entertainment. Jews may not take part in public sports. Swimming baths, tennis courts, hockey fields, and other sports grounds are all prohibited to them. Jews may not visit Christians. Jews must go to Jewish schools, and many other restrictions of a similar kind. So we could not do this and were forbidden to do that. But life went on in spite of it all. You're scared to do anything because it may be forbidden. Our freedom was strictly limited, yet things were still bearable. Granny died in 1942. No one will ever know how much she is present in my thoughts and how much I love her still. In 1934, I went to school at the Montessori kindergarten and continued there. It was at the end of the school year. I was in Form B when I had to say goodbye to Mrs. K. We both wept. It was very sad. In 1941, I went with my sister Margaret to the Jewish secondary school, she into the 4th form and I into the 1st. So far, everything is all right with the four of us, and here I come to the present day. Sunday morning, 5 July 1942. Dear Kitty, our examination results were announced in the Jewish theater last Friday. I couldn't have hoped for better. My report is not at all bad. I had 1 Vixatis, a 5 for algebra, 2 6s, and the rest were all 7s or 8s. They were certainly pleased at home, although over the question of marks, my parents are quite different from most. They don't care a bit whether my reports are good or bad, as long as I'm well and happy and not too cheeky. Then the rest will come by itself. I am just the opposite. I don't want to be a bad pupil. I should really have stayed in the 7th form in the Montessori school, but was accepted for the Jewish secondary. When all the Jewish children had to go to Jewish schools, the headmaster took Lise and me conditionally after a bit of persuasion. He relied on us to do our best, and I don't want to let him down. My sister Margaret has her report, too. Brilliant, as usual. She would move up with cum laude if that existed at school. She's so brainy. Daddy has been at home a lot lately, as there's nothing for him to do at business. It must be rotten to feel so superfluous. Mr. Copehouse has taken over Travis, and Mr. Crawler, the firm Coland and Company. When we walked across our little square together a few days ago, Daddy began to talk of us going into hiding. I asked him why on earth he was beginning to talk of that already. Yes, Anne, he said. You know that we've been taking food, clothes, furniture to other people for more than a year now. We don't want our belongings to be seized by the Germans, but we certainly don't want to fall into their clutches ourselves. So we shall disappear of our own accord and not wait until they come and fetch us. But, Daddy, when would it be? He spoke so seriously that I grew very anxious. Don't you worry about it. We shall arrange everything. Make the most of your carefree young life while you can. That was all. Oh, may the fulfillment of these somber words remain far distant yet. Yours, Anne. Thursday, 9 July, 1942. Dear Kitty, so we walked in the pouring rain, Daddy, Mummy, and I, each with a school satchel and shopping bag filled to the brim with all kinds of things thrown together anyhow. We got sympathetic looks from people on their way to work. You could see by their faces how sorry they were they couldn't offer us a lift. The gaudy yellow star spoke for itself. Only when we were on the road did Mummy and Daddy begin to tell me bits and pieces about the plan. For months, as many of our goods and chattels and necessities of life as possible had been sent away, and they were sufficiently ready for us to have gone into hiding of our own accord on July 16th. The plan had had to be speeded up 10 days because of the call-up, so our quarters would not be so well organized, but we had to make the best of it. The hiding place itself would be in the building where Daddy has his office. It will be hard for outsiders to understand, but I shall explain that later on. Daddy didn't have many people working for him. Mr. Kraler, Copehouse, Meep, and Ellie Varson, a 23-year-old typist, who all knew of our arrival. Mr. Fossen, Ellie's father, and 2 boys worked in the warehouse. They had not been told. I will describe the building. There is a large warehouse on the ground floor which is used as a store. The front door to the house is next to the warehouse door, and inside the front door is a second doorway which leads to a staircase. There is another door at the top of the stairs with a frosted glass window in it which has office written in black letters across it. That is the large main office, very big, very light, and very full. Ellie, Meep, and Mr. Copehouse work there in the daytime. A small dark room containing the safe, a wardrobe, and a large cupboard leads to a small, somewhat dark second office. Mr. Kraler and Mr. Fontan used to sit here. Now it is only Mr. Kraler. One can reach Kraler's office from the passage, but only via a glass door which can be opened from the inside, but not easily from the outside. From Kraler's office, a long passage goes past the coal store, up 4 steps, and leads to the showroom of the whole building, the private office. Dark, dignified furniture, linoleum and carpets on the floor, radio, smart lamp, everything first class. Next door, there's a roomy kitchen with a hot water faucet and a gas stove. Next door, the WC. That is the first floor. A wooden staircase leads from the downstairs passage to the next floor. There's a small landing at the top. There is a door at each end of the landing, the left one leading to a storeroom at the front of the house and to the attics. One of those really steep Dutch staircases runs from the side to the other door opening onto the street. The right-hand door leads to our secret annex. No one would ever guess that there would be so many rooms hidden behind that plain gray door. There's a little step in front of the door, and then you're inside. There is a steep staircase immediately opposite the entrance. On the left, a tiny passage brings you into a room which was to have become the Franck family's bed-sitting room. Next door, a smaller room, study and bedroom for the 2 young ladies of the family. On the right, a little room without windows containing the wash basin and a small WC compartment with another door leading to Margaret's and my room. If you go up the next flight of stairs and open the door, you are simply amazed that there could be such a big, light room in such an old house by the canal. There's a gas stove in this room, thanks to the fact that it was used as a laboratory, and a sink. This is now the kitchen for the Fondan couple, besides being general living room, dining room, and scullery. A tiny little corridor room will become Peter Fondan's apartment. Then, just as on the lower landing, there's a large attic. So there you are. I've introduced you to the whole of our beautiful secret annex. Yours, Anne. Tuesday, 10 November, 1942. Dear Kitty, great news. We want to take in an 8th person. Yes, really. We've always thought that there was quite enough room and food for one more. We were only afraid of giving Copehouse and Kraler more trouble. But now that the appalling stories we hear about Jews are getting even worse, Daddy got hold of the 2 people who had to decide, and they thought it was an excellent plan. It is just as dangerous for 7 as for 8, they said, and quite rightly. When this was settled, we ran through our circle of friends, trying to think of a single person who would fit in well with our family. It wasn't difficult to hit on someone. After Daddy had refused all members of the Fondan family, We chose a dentist called Albert Dussel, whose wife was fortunate enough to be out of the country when the war broke out. He is known to be quiet, and so far as we and Mr. Fondant can judge from a superficial acquaintance, both families think he's a congenial person. Miep knows him, too, so she will be able to make arrangements for him to join us. If he comes, he will have to sleep in my room instead of Margaret, who will use the camp bed. Yours, Anne. Friday, 20 November, 1942. Dear Kitty, none of us really knows how to take it all. The news about the Jews had not really penetrated through to us until now, and we thought it best to remain as cheerful as possible. Every now and then, when Miep lets out something about what has happened to a friend, Mummy and Mrs. Fondant always begin to cry, so Miep thinks it better not to tell us any more. But Dussel was immediately plied with questions from all sides, and the stories he told us were so gruesome and dreadful that one can't get them out of one's mind. Yet we shall still have our jokes and tease each other when these horrors have faded a bit in our minds. It won't do us any good or help those outside to go on being as gloomy as we are at the moment. And what would be the object of making our secret annex into a secret annex of gloom? Must I keep thinking about those other people, whatever I'm doing? And if I want to laugh about something, should I stop myself quickly and feel ashamed that I'm cheerful? Ought I then to cry the whole day long? No, that I can't do. Besides, in time, this gloom will wear off. Added to this misery, there's another, but of a purely personal kind, and it pales into insignificance beside all the wretchedness I've just told you about. Still, I can't refrain from telling you that lately I've begun to feel deserted. I'm surrounded by too great a void. I never used to feel like this. My fun and amusements and my girlfriends completely filled my thoughts. Now I either think about unhappy things or about myself. And at long last I've made the discovery that Daddy, although he's such a darling, still cannot take the place of my entire little world of bygone days. But why do I bother you with such foolish things? I'm very ungrateful, Kitty, I know that, but it often makes my head swim if I'm jumped upon too much, and then on top of that, to have to think about all those other miseries. Yours, Anne. Friday, 2 April, 1943. Dear Kitty. Oh, dear. I've got another terrible black mark against my name. I was lying in bed yesterday evening, waiting for Daddy to come and say my prayers with me and wish me good night, when Mummy came into my room, sat on my bed, and asked very nicely, "Anne, Daddy can't come yet. Shall I say your prayers with you tonight?" "No, Mummy," I answered. Mummy got up, paused by my bed for a moment, and walked slowly towards the door. Suddenly she turned around and, with a distorted look on her face, said, "I don't want to be cross. Love cannot be forced." There were tears in her eyes as she left the room. I lay still in bed, feeling at once that I'd been horrible to push her away so rudely, but I knew, too, that I couldn't have answered differently. It simply wouldn't work. I felt sorry for Mummy, very, very sorry, because I had seen for the first time in my life that she minds my coldness. I saw the look of sorrow on her face when she spoke of love not being forced. It is hard to speak the truth, and yet it is the truth. She herself has pushed me away. Her tactless remarks and her crude jokes, which I don't find at all funny, have now made me insensitive to any love from her side. Just as I shrink at her hard words, so did her heart when she realized that the love between us was gone. She cried half the night and hardly slept at all. Daddy doesn't look at me, and if he does for a second, then I read in his eyes the words, "How can you be so unkind? How can you bring yourself to cause your mother such sorrow?" Oh, they expect me to apologize.
But this is something I can't apologize for because I spoke the truth, and Mummy will have to know it sooner or later anyway. I seem, and indeed am, indifferent both to Mummy's tears and Daddy's looks because, for the first time, they are both aware of something which I've always felt. I can only feel sorry for Mummy, who has now had to discover that I have adopted her own attitude. For myself, I remain silent and aloof, and I shall not shrink from the truth any longer, because the longer it is put off, the more difficult it will be for them when they do hear it. Yours, Anne.
Friday, 23 July, 1943. Dear Kitty, just for fun, I'm going to tell you each person's first wish when we're allowed to go outside again. Margaret and Mr. Fondant long more than anything for a hot bath filled to overflowing and want to stay in it for half an hour. Mrs. Fondant wants to go and eat cream cakes immediately. Dasso thinks of nothing but seeing Lotte, his wife. Mummy of her cup of coffee. Daddy's going to visit Mr. Fossen first. Peter the town and a cinema, while I should find it so blissful I shouldn't know where to start. But most of all, I long for a home of our own, to be able to move freely and to have some help with my work again at last. In other words, school. Ellie has offered to get some fruit. It costs next to nothing. Grapes, 75 cents a pound. Gooseberries, 20 cents per pound. One peach, 14 cents. One 2-pound melon, 42 cents. Then you see in the newspapers every evening in Play Fair and keep prices down. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 4 August, 1943. Dear Kitty, now that we've been in the secret annex for over a year, you know something of our lives, but some of it is quite indescribable. There's so much to tell. Everything is so different from ordinary times and from ordinary people's lives. But still, to give you a closer look into our lives, now and again, I intend to give you a description of an ordinary day. Today, I'm beginning with the evening and night. 9 o'clock in the evening. The bustle of going to bed in the secret annex begins, and it is always really quite a business. Chairs are shoved about, beds are pulled down, blankets unfolded. Nothing remains where it is during the day. I sleep on a little divan, which is not more than 1.5 meters long, so chairs have to be used to lengthen it. A quilt, sheets, pillows, blankets are all fetched from Dussel's bed, where they remain during the day. One hears terrible creaking in the next room, Margaret's concertina bed being pulled out. Again, divan, blankets, and pillows. Everything is done to make the wooden slats a bit more comfortable. It sounds like thunder above, but it is only Mrs. Fondant's bed. This is shifted to the window, you see, in order to give Her Majesty in the pink bed jacket fresh air to tickle her dainty nostrils. After Peter's finished, I step into the washing cubicle, where I give myself a thorough wash and general toilet. It occasionally happens, only in the hot weeks or months, that there is a tiny flea floating in the water. Then teeth-cleaning, hair-curling, manicure, and my cotton wool pads with hydrogen peroxide to bleach black mustache hairs, all this in under half an hour. 9:30. Quickly into dressing gowns, soap in one hand, potty, hairpins, pants, curlers, and cotton wool in the other, I hurry out of the bathroom. But usually I'm called back once for the various hairs which decorate the wash basin in graceful curves, but which are not approved of by the next person. 10 o'clock. Put up the blackout. Good night. For at least a quarter of an hour there's a creaking of beds and a sighing of broken springs. Then all is quiet. At least, that is, if our neighbors upstairs don't quarrel in bed. 11:30. The bathroom door creaks. A narrow strip of light falls into the room. A squeak of shoes, a large coat, even larger than the man inside it. Dussel returns from his night work in Crawler's office. Shuffling on the floor for 10 minutes, crackle of paper, that's the food which has to be stowed away, and a bed is made. Then the form disappears again, and one only hears suspicious noises from the lavatory from time to time. 3 o'clock. I have to get up for a little job in the metal pot under my bed, which is on a rubber mat for safety's sake in case of leakage. When this has to take place, I always hold my breath as it clatters into the tin like a brook from a mountain. Then the pot is returned to its place, and the figure in the white nightgown, which evokes the same cry from Margaret every evening, "Oh, that indecent nightdress," steps back into bed. Then a certain person lies awake for about a quarter of an hour, listening to the sounds of the night. Firstly, to whether there might not be a burglar downstairs, then to the various beds above, next door, and in my room, from which one is usually able to make out how the various members of the household are sleeping, or how they pass the night in wakefulness. The latter is certainly not pleasant, especially when it concerns a member of the family by the name of Dussel. First I hear a sound like a fish gasping for breath. This is repeated 9 or 10 times, and then, with much ado and interchanged with little smacking sounds, the lips are moistened, followed by a lengthy twisting and turning in bed and rearranging of pillows. 5 minutes perfect peace. And then the same sequence of events unfolds itself at least 3 times more after the doctor has soothed himself to sleep again for a little while. It can also happen that we get a bit of shooting in the night, varying between 1 o'clock and 4. I never really realize it until, from habit, I'm already standing at my bedside. Sometimes I'm so busy dreaming that I'm thinking about French irregular verbs or a quarrel upstairs. It is some time before I begin to realize that guns are firing and that I am still in the room, but it usually happens as described above. I quickly grab a pillow and handkerchief, put on my dressing gown and slippers, and scamper to Daddy, like Margaret wrote in this birthday poem. The first shot sounds at dead of night. Hush, look! A door creaks open wide. A little girl glides into sight, clasping a pillow to her side. Once landed in the big bed, the worst is over, except if the firing gets very bad. 7:15. Bring! The alarm clock that raises its voice at any hour of the day, if one asks for it, and sometimes when one doesn't. Crack! Ping! Mrs. Fondant has turned it off. Creak! Mr. Fondant gets up, puts on water, and then full speed to the bathroom. 7:15. The door creaks again. Dussel can go to the bathroom. Once alone, I take down the blackout, and a new day in the secret annex has begun. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 5 January 1944. Dear Kitty, I have 2 things to confess to you today which will take a long time. But I must tell someone, and you're the best one to tell, as I know that, come what may, you always keep a secret. The first is about Mummy. You know that I've grumbled a lot about Mummy, yet still tried to be nice to her again. Now it is suddenly clear to me what she lacks. Mummy herself has told us that she looked upon us more as her friends than as her daughters. Now that is all very fine, but still, a friend can't take a mother's place. I need my mother as an example which I can follow. I want to be able to respect her. I have the feeling that Margaret thinks differently about these things and would never be able to understand what I've just told you. And Daddy avoids all arguments about Mummy. I imagine a mother as a woman who, in the first place, shows great tact, especially towards her children when they reach our age, and who does not laugh at me if I cry about something, not pain, but other things, like Mums does. One thing, which perhaps may seem rather fatuous, I have never forgiven her. It was on a day that I had to go to the dentist. Mummy and Margaret were going to come with me and agreed that I should take my bicycle. When we'd finished at the dentist and were outside again, Margaret and Mummy told me that they were going into the town to look at something or buy something. I don't remember exactly what. I wanted to go too, but was not allowed to. Tears of rage sprang into my eyes, and Mummy and Margaret began laughing at me. Then I became so furious that I stuck my tongue out at them in the street, just as an old woman happened to pass by who looked very shocked. I rode home on my bicycle, and I know I cried for a long time. It is queer that the wound that Mummy made then still burns when I think of how angry I was that afternoon. The second is something that is very difficult to tell you because it is about myself. Yesterday I read an article about blushing by Sis Hester. This article might have been addressed to me personally, although I don't blush very easily. The other things in it certainly all fit me. She writes roughly something like this: that a girl in the years of puberty becomes quiet within and begins to think about the wonders that are happening to her body. I experience that too. And that is why I get the feeling lately of being embarrassed about Margaret and Mummy and Daddy. Strangely enough, Margaret, who's much more shy than I am, isn't at all embarrassed. I think what is happening to me is so wonderful, and not only what can be seen on my body, but all that's taking place inside. I never discuss myself or any of these things with anybody. That is why I have to talk to myself about them. Each time I have a period, and that has only been 3 times, I have the feeling that in spite of all the pain, unpleasantness, and nastiness, I have a sweet secret. And that is why, although it's nothing but a nuisance to me in a way, I always long for the time that I shall feel that secret within me again. Sis Hester also writes that girls of this age don't feel quite certain of themselves and discover that they themselves are individuals with ideas, thoughts, and habits. After I came here, when I was just 14, I began to think about myself sooner than most girls and to know that I am a person. Sometimes, when I lie in bed at night, I have a terrible desire to feel my breasts and to listen to the quiet, rhythmic beat of my heart. I already had these kinds of feelings subconscious. When I slept with a girlfriend, I had a strong desire to kiss her, and that I did do so. I could not help being terribly inquisitive over her body, for she'd always kept it hidden from me. I asked her whether, as a proof of our friendship, we should feel one another's breasts, but she refused. I go into ecstasies every time I see the naked figure of a woman, such as Venus, for example. It strikes me as so wonderful and exquisite that I have difficulty in stopping the tears rolling down my cheeks. If only I had a girlfriend. Yours, Anne. Saturday, 12 February, 1944. Dear Kitty, the sun is shining. The sky is a deep blue. There's a lovely breeze. And I'm longing, so longing for everything. To talk, for freedom, for friends, to be alone. And I do so long to cry. I feel as if I'm going to burst, and I know it would get better with crying, but I can't. I'm restless. I go from one room to the other, breathe through the crack of a closed window, feel my heart beating as if it's saying, "Can't you satisfy my longings at last?" I believe that it's spring within me. I feel that spring is awakening. I feel it in my whole body and soul. It is an effort to behave normally. I feel utterly confused. Don't know what to read, what to write, what to do. I only know that I'm longing. Yours, Anne. Sunday, 13 February, 1944. Dear Kitty, since Saturday, a lot has changed for me. It came about like this. I longed, and am still longing, but now something has happened which has made it a little
just a little less. To my great joy, I will be quite honest about it. Already this morning I noticed that Pater kept looking at me all the time. Not in the ordinary way. I don't know how. I just can't explain. I used to think that Pater was in love with Margaret, but yesterday I suddenly had the feeling that it is not so. I made a special effort not to look at him too much, because whenever I did too, and then, yes, then, it gave me a lovely feeling inside, but which I mustn't feel too often. I desperately want to be alone. Daddy has noticed that I'm not quite my usual self, but I really can't tell him everything. Leave me in peace, leave me alone. That's what I'd like to keep crying out all the time. Who knows? A day may come when I'm left alone more than I would wish. Yours, Anne.
Friday, 18 February, 1944. Dear Kitty, whenever I go upstairs now, I keep on hoping that I shall see him. Because my life now has an object, and I have something to look forward to, everything has become more pleasant. At least the object of my feelings is always there, and I needn't be afraid of rivals except Margaret. Don't think I'm in love, because I'm not. But I do have the feeling all the time that something fine can grow up between us, something that gives confidence and friendship. If I get half a chance, I go up to him now. It's not like it used to be when he didn't know how to begin. It's just the opposite. He's still talking when I'm half out of the room. Mummy doesn't like it much and always says I'll be a nuisance and that I must leave him in peace. Honestly, doesn't she realize that I've got some intuition? She looks at me so queerly every time I go into Pater's little room. If I come downstairs from there, she asks me where I've been. I simply can't bear it and think it's horrible. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 23 February, 1944. Dear Kitty, it's lovely weather outside, and I've quite perked up since yesterday. Nearly every morning I go to the attic where Pater works to blow the stuffy air out of my lungs. From my favorite spot on the floor, I look up at the blue sky and the bare chestnut tree on whose branches little raindrops shine, appearing like silver, and at the seagulls and other birds as they glide on the wind. He stood with his head against a thick beam, and I sat down. We breathed the fresh air, looked outside, and both felt that the spell should not be broken by words. We remained like this for a long time, and when he had to go up to the loft to chop wood, I knew that he was a nice fellow. He climbed the ladder and I followed. Then he chopped wood for about a quarter of an hour, during which time we still remained silent. I watched him from where I stood. He was obviously doing his best to show off his strength. But I looked out of the open window, too, over a large area of Amsterdam, over all the roofs, and onto the horizon, which was such a pale blue that it was hard to see the dividing line. As long as this exists, I thought, and I may live to see it, this sunshine, the cloudless skies, while this lasts, I cannot be unhappy. The best remedy for those who are afraid, lonely, or unhappy is to go outside, somewhere where they can be quite alone with the heavens, nature, and God, because only then does one feel that all is as it should be, and that God wishes to see people happy amidst the simple beauty of nature. As long as this exists, and it certainly always will, I know that then there will always be comfort for every sorrow, whatever the circumstances may be, and I firmly believe that nature brings solace in all troubles. Oh, who knows? Perhaps it won't be long before I can share this overwhelming feeling of bliss with someone who feels the way I do about it. Yours, Anne. Saturday, 4 March, 1944. Dear Kitty, this is the first Saturday for months and months that hasn't been boring, dreary, and dull, and Pater is the cause. This morning I went to the attic to hang up my apron when Daddy asked whether I'd like to stay and talk some French. I agreed. First we talked French and I explained something to Pater. Then we did some English. Daddy read out loud to us from Dickens, and I was in the seventh heaven because I sat on Daddy's chair very close to Pater. I went downstairs at 11 o'clock. When I came upstairs again at 11:30, he was already waiting for me on the stairs. We talked until 1:45. If, as I leave the room, he gets a chance after a meal, for instance, and if no one can hear, he says, "Goodbye, Anne, see you soon." Oh, I am so pleased. I wonder if he is going to fall in love with me after all. Anyway, he's a very nice fellow, and no one knows what lovely talks I have with him. Mrs. Fondant quite approves when I go and talk to him, but she asked today, teasingly, "Can I really trust you two up there together?" "Of course," I protested. "Really, you quite insult me. From morn till night I look forward to seeing Pater. Yours, Anne." Monday, 3 April, 1944. Dear Kitty, contrary to my usual custom, I will for once write more fully about food, because it has become a very difficult and important matter, not only here in the secret annex, but in the whole of Holland, all Europe, and even beyond. In the 21 months that we've spent here, we've been through a good many food cycles. You'll understand what that means in a minute. When I talk of food cycles, I mean periods in which one has nothing else to eat but one particular dish or kind of vegetable. We had nothing but endive for a long time, day in, day out, endive with sand, endive without sand, stew with endive, boiled or en casserole. Then it was spinach, and after that followed kohlrabi, salsify, cucumbers, tomatoes, sauerkraut, etc., etc. For instance, it's really disagreeable to eat a lot of sauerkraut for lunch and supper every day, but you do it if you're hungry. However, we have the most delightful period of all now, because we don't get any fresh vegetables at all. Our weekly menu for supper consists of kidney beans, pea soup, potatoes with dumplings, potato chalet, and by the grace of God, occasionally turnip tops or rotten carrots, and then the kidney beans once again. We eat potatoes at every meal, beginning with breakfast because of the bread shortage. We make our soup from kidney or haricot beans, potatoes, julienne soup in packets, French beans in packets, kidney beans in packets. Everything contains beans, not to mention the bread. In the evening, we always have potatoes with gravy substitute, and thank goodness we've still got it, beetroot salad. I must still tell you about the dumplings, which we make out of government flour, water, and yeast. They're so sticky and tough, they lie like stones in one's stomach. Oh, well, the great attraction each week is a slice of liver sausage and jam on dry bread. But we're still alive, and quite often we even enjoy our poor meals. Yours, Anne. Sunday morning, just before 11 o'clock, 16 April 1944. Darlingest Kitty, remember yesterday's date, for it is a very important day in my life. Surely it's a great day for every girl when she receives her first kiss. Well, then, it is just as important for me, too. Brahms' kiss on my right cheek doesn't count anymore. Likewise, the one from Mr. Walker on my right hand. How did I suddenly come by this kiss? Well, I will tell you. Yesterday evening at 8 o'clock, I was sitting with Pater on his divan. It wasn't long before his arm went round me. "Let's move up a bit," I said, "then I don't bump my head against the cupboard." He moved up almost into the corner. I laid my arm under his and across his back, and he just about buried me because his arm was hanging on my shoulder. Now, we've sat like this on other occasions, but never so close together as yesterday. He held me firmly against him, my left shoulder against his chest. Already my heart began to beat faster, but we had not finished yet. He didn't rest until my head was on his shoulder and his against it. When I sat upright again after about 5 minutes,
He soon took my head in his hands and laid it against him once more. Oh, it was so lovely I couldn't talk much. The joy was too great. He stroked my cheek and arm a bit awkwardly, played with my curls, and our heads lay touching most of the time. I can't tell you, Kitty, the feeling that ran through me all the while. I was too happy for words, and I believe he was as well. We got up at 8:30. Peter put on his gym shoes so that when he toured the house he wouldn't make a noise, and I stood beside him. How it came about so suddenly, I don't know, but before we went downstairs, he kissed me through my hair, half on my left cheek, half on my ear. I tore downstairs without looking round, and am simply longing for today. Yours, Anne.
Thursday, 25 May, 1944. Dear Kitty, there's something fresh every day. This morning our vegetable man was picked up for having 2 Jews in his house. It's a great blow to us, not only that those poor Jews are balancing on the edge of an abyss, but it's terrible for the man himself. The world has turned topsy-turvy. Respectable people are being sent off to concentration camps, prisons, and lonely cells, and the dregs that remain govern young and old, rich and poor. One person walks into the trap through the black market, a second through helping the Jews or other people who've had to go underground. Anyone who isn't a member of the Nazi Party doesn't know what may happen to him from one day to another. This man is a great loss to us, too. The girls can't and aren't allowed to haul along our share of potatoes, so the only thing to do is to eat less. I will tell you how we shall do that. It's certainly not going to make things any pleasanter. Mummy says we shall cut out breakfast altogether, have porridge and bread for lunch, and for supper, fried potatoes and possibly once or twice per week vegetables or lettuce, nothing more. We're going to be hungry, but anything is better than being discovered. Yours, Anne. Tuesday, 6 June, 1944. Dear Kitty, this is D-Day, came the announcement over the English news, and quite rightly, this is the day. The invasion has begun. The English gave the news at 8 o'clock this morning. Calais, Boulogne, Le Havre, and Cherbourg, also the Pas-de-Calais, as usual, were heavily bombarded. Moreover, as a safety measure for all occupied territories, all people who live within a radius of 35 kilometers from the coast are warned to be prepared for bombardments. If possible, the English will drop pamphlets 1 hour beforehand. According to German news, English parachute troops have landed on the French coast. English landing craft are in battle with the German Navy, says the BBC. We discussed it over the annex breakfast at 9 o'clock. Is this just a trial landing like Dieppe 2 years ago? English broadcast in German, Dutch, French, and other languages at 10 o'clock. The invasion has begun. That means the real invasion. English broadcast in German at 11 o'clock. Speech by the Supreme Commander, General Dwight Eisenhower. The English news at 12 o'clock in English. This is D-Day, General Eisenhower said to the French people. Stiff fighting will come now, but after this, the victory. The year 1944 is the year of complete victory. Good luck. English news in English at 1 o'clock. 11,000 planes stand ready and are flying to and fro non-stop, landing troops and attacking behind the lines. 4,000 landing boats plus small craft are landing troops and materiel between Cherbourg and Le Havre incessantly. English and American troops are already engaged in hard fighting. Speeches by Gerbrandy, by the Prime Minister of Belgium, King Håkon of Norway, de Gaulle of France, the King of England, and last but not least, Churchill. Great commotion in the secret annex. Would the long-awaited liberation that has been talked of so much, but which still seems too wonderful, too much like a fairy tale, ever come true? Could we be granted victory this year, 1944? We don't know yet, but hope is revived within us.
It gives us fresh courage and makes us strong again. Since we must put up bravely with all the fears, privations, and sufferings, the great thing now is to remain calm and steadfast. Now more than ever we must clench our teeth and not cry out. France, Russia, Italy, and Germany, too, can all cry out and give vent to their misery, but we haven't the right to do that yet. Oh, Kitty, the best part of the invasion is that I have the feeling that friends are approaching. We've been oppressed by those terrible Germans for so long. They've had their knives so at our throats that the thought of friends and delivery fills us with confidence. Now it doesn't concern the Jews anymore. No, it concerns Holland and all occupied Europe. Perhaps, Margaret says, I may yet be able to go back to school in September or October. Yours, Anne. P.S. I'll keep you up to date with all the latest news.
Tuesday, 1 August, 1944. Dear Kitty, little bundle of contradictions. That's how I ended one of my last entries, and that's how I'm going to begin this one. A little bundle of contradictions. Can you tell me exactly what it is? What does contradiction mean? Like so many words, it can mean two things, contradiction from without and contradiction from within. The first is the ordinary not giving in easily, always knowing best, getting in the last word. Enfin, all the unpleasant qualities for which I'm renowned. The second nobody knows about. That's my own secret. I've already told you before that I have, as it were, a dual personality. One half embodies my exuberant cheerfulness, making fun of everything, my high-spiritedness, and above all, the way I take everything lightly. This includes not taking offense at a flirtation, a kiss, an embrace, a dirty joke. This side is usually lying in wait and pushes away the other, which is much better, deeper, and purer. You must realize that no one knows Anne's better side, and that's why most people find me so insufferable. Certainly, I'm a giddy clown for one afternoon, but then everyone's had enough of me for another month. Really, it's just the same as a love film is for deep-thinking people. Simply a diversion, amusing just for once, something which is soon forgotten, not bad, but certainly not good. I loathe having to tell you this, but why shouldn't I if I know it's true anyway? My lighter, superficial side will always be too quick for the deeper side of me, and that's why it will always win. You can't imagine how often I've tried to push this Anne away, to cripple her, to hide her, because after all, she's only half of what's called Anne. But it doesn't work, and I know, too, why it doesn't work. I'm awfully scared that everyone who knows me as I always am will discover that I have another side, a finer and better side. I'm afraid they'll laugh at me, think I'm ridiculous and sentimental, not take me seriously. I'm used to not being taken seriously, but it's only the light-hearted Anne that's used to it and can bear it. The deeper Anne is too frail for it. Sometimes, if I really compel the good Anne to take the stage for a quarter of an hour, she simply shrivels up as soon as she has to speak and lets Anne number one take over, and before I realize it, she's disappeared. Therefore, the nice Anne is never present in company, has not appeared one single time so far, but almost always predominates when we're alone. I know exactly how I'd like to be, how I am, too, inside. But alas, I'm only like that for myself. And perhaps that's why, no, I'm sure it's the reason why I say I've got a happy nature within, and why other people think I've got a happy nature without. I am guided by the pure Anne within, but outside I'm nothing but a frolicsome little goat who's broken loose. As I've already said, I never utter my real feelings about anything, and that's how I've acquired the name of chaser after boys, flirt, know-all, reader of love stories. The cheerful Anne laughs about it, gives cheeky answers, shrugs her shoulders indifferently, behaves as if she doesn't care. But oh
dearie me, the quiet Anne's reactions are just the opposite. If I'm to be quite honest, then I must admit that it does hurt me, that I try terribly hard to change myself, but that I'm always fighting against a more powerful enemy. A voice sobs within me, "There you are, that's what's become of you. You're uncharitable, you look supercilious and peevish. People dislike you, and all because you won't listen to the advice given you by your own better half. Oh, I would like to listen, but it doesn't work. If I'm quiet and serious, everyone thinks it's a new comedy, and then I have to get out of it by turning it into a joke, not to mention my family, who are sure to think I'm ill, make me swallow pills for headaches and nerves, feel my neck and my head to see whether I'm running a temperature, ask if I'm constipated, and criticize me for being in a bad mood. I can't keep that up. If I'm watched to that extent, I start by getting snappy, then unhappy, and finally I twist my heart round again so that the bad is on the outside and the good is on the inside, and keep on trying to find a way of becoming what I would so like to be, and what I could be if there weren't any other people living in the world. Yours, Anne.